Yo, what is up guys, this is Tyrannic Swine here and welcome to another game review. This time I'm reviewing Wolfenstein 2, the New Colossus, and the sequel to Wolfenstein, the New Order. And the first thing I really have to say about this game is, what the hell happened? After playing the New Order and finding out it's a good game, it does have its sort of problems, but it was a fun game to play, and whilst the Old Blood was more of a disappointing mess, the New Colossus is sort of in between the two of these games in the fact that it does some things right, but it gets a hell of a lot of things wrong. And so let's start this off with the story. Now the story immediately picks up after the events of the New Order, and the way the New Order ended was sort of annoying to me because of the fact that it ended on a cliffhanger with Blazkowicz giving the order that they should nuke Death's Head's compound. Yet at the very beginning of this game, his friends just ignore that order entirely and mount a rescue mission to get him, and somehow manage to get him out of there very quickly without any problems, and then they set the nuke off. And then Blazkowicz goes into like a 5 months recovery coma until Frau Engel, who has now become the main villain of the game, suddenly finds them in their submarine base, and then it's under attack, and then Blazkowicz has to do what he does best. Now the opening section of this game is actually pretty damn fun, with the fact that you go around the submarine killing Nazis in a wheelchair, and even though Blazkowicz is on his last legs, he's still trying to take out Nazis as much as he can just to make sure his friends are safe. I thought this whole section was pretty cool, and it's a good opening for the game. At least it was a lot better than Blazkowicz getting captured than the Old Blood did and the New Order. Oh wait, never mind, it actually does that once again, immediately after Frau Engel shows up on the submarine, and then you just give up because Wyatt and Caroline have been captured. So yes, once again, in a friggin' Wolfenstein game, I'm pretty sure Machine Games are making a goddamn habit of this, with Blazkowicz always ending up being captured at the beginning of the fucking game. Except this time, this is probably the most interesting event, since it shows just how fucking insane and creepy Frau Engel is. It introduces her daughter for some reason, who we've never seen before, which is kind of random. But the main thing is that even though you feel like you're about to get killed, Frau Engel ends up killing Caroline. I mean, she wasn't entirely a great character for the New Order, but she was better than most, and it kind of sucks that we just kill her off as soon as the game starts, and especially after she just got the power armor from the New Order. So that kind of sucks for her character. And of course you have your timeline differences, which I will explain later with Wyatt and Fergus, between the two, like, outcomes. But nonetheless, we'll get to that in a minute. So yeah, pretty much once you escape Frau Engel's airship with Caroline's power armor, since that's what you put on, since Blazkowicz is practically unable to walk, Caroline left behind in her diary an objective for the others that they need to free the US to use it as a staging ground to like free the rest of the world from the Nazi menace. Now, despite the game starting once again much like the Old Blood and the New Order with Blazkowicz getting captured, the first half of the story isn't actually too bad. In fact, in some ways it does more than New Order ever did, in my opinion. It does a lot of things, especially with Blazkowicz's character. The fact that he's questioning his own mortality because of his injuries from the New Order is making him want to avoid Anya from telling the truth, especially since she's now pregnant and is going to have twins, which is obviously making Blazkowicz feel worried that he's not going to be around to ever see his kids being born or even raised with him being there to protect them. So of course he's avoiding Anya just so he can't like hurt her in any way or that sort of thing. And this adds more to the development of Blazkowicz and Anya's relationship. Honestly, in the New Order, it felt like to me they were just fuck buddies. There was really nothing going on for me there other than that. And honestly, they were the only two characters I really gave some shit about in the New Order. but at least in this game they tried to do something about that, and yeah, for the first half it goes okay, let's just say that. Hell, they do even more for Blazkowicz's character in the first half of this game, more than they do with the New Order and the Old Blood combined. I mean, and to be honest, all he was doing in those games was following objectives and killing Nazis. In this game, we actually get a little bit more of a character from him. And pretty much they show a lot of his background as a child, all the stuff he had when he was growing up, his like parental issues and stuff like that. I actually thought this was pretty interesting and gave me more of a reason to like Blazkowicz, and it made me actually feel bad for him, considering how his upbringing was pretty shit, especially around his father, and that his mother was the only good thing around him, and his dog, and this girl he also had an interaction with, who we don't really get to know, but I feel like they're trying to tell us something, but I don't really know anything. But yeah, other than that, they actually give Blazkowicz more character than they really ever did in the past, which is something that was really done pretty well. Probably a really big part of the story is the fact that Blazkowicz actually encounters his father when he's now an adult and his father is just some old man. And hell, his father even tries to threaten to kill Blazkowicz, especially even after he's called, like, Frau Engel where he is and everything, but it comes to show that Blazkowicz has definitely changed from a child to a man. And he definitely doesn't show any fear to his father anymore, and trust me, killing that dude felt really fun. However, once you get to the halfway point, that's when things go downhill oh so quickly. Not only do you get captured once again after killing your father by Frau Engel, I mean, you literally have this sort of judgment in the Reich, and then you end up escaping miraculously, and then Blazkowicz has this vision with his mother, and then suddenly he just wakes up and he's in chains again in the Reich, and it's like, oh, this whole thing was a freaking dream, and that's it. That was a complete and utter weird surprise for me. And after that, Blazkowicz literally gets beheaded by Frau Engel in front of an entire crowd of people on live television. And then I was like, what the fuck just happened? And then by some miraculous thing that happened with a friggin' like drone that catches his severed head, Set and the others managed to keep Blazkowicz alive by injecting tubes into his head and putting him in like a water jar head, like you see in Futurama, which honestly was kind of funny, but how? How the hell does this make any sense? I mean, the fact that they have like this spare body around for some reason, just like, what? What's this been the whole bloody time? And apparently, like, Caroline found it or something. I'm like, what? What the fuck was the whole point of this? I mean, it would have been interesting if they had killed Blazkowicz and then you'd swap to another character or something afterwards so you can finish what he did. That would have been a much more interesting plot twist. But the fact that he kept Blazkowicz alive in some Futurama Deus Ex Machina move just really kind of hurt the story a lot in a lot of ways for me. Then after that, as you enter the second half, the story just goes downhill so much as you start to go all over the place to different locations, which kind of annoyed me, just like it did in the New Order, although not too much. But it's just, again, it's like Blazkowicz is doing what he does best, and that's going around killing Nazis and liberating America. And then you meet a whole bunch of new characters who were introduced way late into the game, by like the third to last mission or so, and then it starts sprouting this whole propaganda shit that was entirely unnecessary, even though it was a thing at the time. It was just unnecessary with the whole scene that was going on, and it's just, the story was just completely going downhill for no reason. It's like, they had something going for the first half, like the whole stuff with Blazkowicz and everything, like his background and his whole mortality issue, but then nothing about that is like touched upon ever again after the whole halfway point issue. It's like, what the hell happened? And then once again, the game ends with a incredibly disappointing ending. I know the New Orders was fairly disappointing, but at least that ended with a decent boss fight. Wolfenstein 2 doesn't even do that. I mean, you take Frau Engel's like airplane thing, and then after that you just kill her in a cutscene, and that's it. That's how it ends, and then you apparently start this whole revolution. And yeah, and then it ends. What? Why? Why did it have to end like this? What the hell happened? What? That was bullshit. That ending was horrible, and War Machine knew that. So yeah, Wolfenstein 2's story is One of those where it starts off good, and then it has this huge bit in the middle that just really does so much, but confuses the hell out of you, and then the second half is just so lackluster, and just does nothing to help the story move forward, and then it ends in a hugely disappointing way. And it's sad to see this, because I was actually really enjoying Wolfenstein 2 up until the whole halfway point section, and then it just started boring the hell out of me, and I was like, oh shit, what the hell happened? And that's pretty much the whole question I've been asking this whole time. What the hell happened with the story? I mean, you had something going, and you just messed it up. God, it really sucks to see this happen. Now let's move on to the character section of the game, which, I don't know, the New Order and the Old Blood still didn't really do great with their characters, not by giving us too much, other than the fact that you have the timeline differences with Wyatt and Fergus, which, honestly, there's a little bit of a difference here, for once. I mean, both of them get different injuries at the start of the game when you're captured by Frau Engel. Wyatt ends up getting like his left ear and a part of his face slashed, whilst Fergus loses his left arm entirely. And there is some major differences in the story for these characters especially. Wyatt starts having a fit because of the fact that people expect him to step up now that Caroline's gone and he's like to become this new leader. But for some reason he then starts taking drugs, and that's literally his character for the whole story. He's just become a weird-ass junkie who's become a loony and starts spouting weird shit, and then he almost ends up trying to kill himself. That was probably the only interesting portion of the game for him, and maybe his speech at the end, that was actually okay, but the game really didn't do anything for Wyatt's character. It was just him just trying to get over an addiction, and that's it. There was really nothing brilliant about his character in this game, and that was all there was. However, with Fergus is a little bit more interesting, considering he's a veteran who fought alongside Blazkowicz. He immediately starts to take charge after Caroline's death, and has this new robotic arm installed onto his, severed limb. But since the arm is connected to his mind, it does a lot of things that Fergus doesn't really want, like it ends up beating him up when he's sleeping, or it does like some other stuff that really pissed Fergus off. And honestly, you can feel sorry for the guy, because there were some moments where it's like, oh, you can feel like at least a bit of happiness for Fergus, and then the arm just completely ruins everything, and you're like, well, shit, gotta feel sorry for Fergus there. And yeah, I feel like Fergus's character was given a bit more to do than Wyatt's character was. At least Fergus was useful and actually killed a Nazi with his, the robotic arm, and it had this, little spider hand for him, which was pretty bloody cool. And his little bit at the end, even though he doesn't say anything at the end of the final cutscene, the after credit scene is pretty funny. So honestly, if you're gonna make a decision for when it comes to either saving Wyatt or Fergus, I'd say go for Fergus this time, because Wyatt really doesn't do anything for me whatsoever. The main character, Blazkowicz, like I said before, is obviously improved with his background and everything, and his mortality issues and bringing up his kids with Anya, but obviously that is all just completely set aside for no reason once you get into the second half of the game. It annoys me how they just did that with Blazkowicz's character. It's like you had something going for him, and you just completely fuck it up by not even mentioning it again whatsoever afterwards. And especially Anya doesn't even feel like much of a character either. I mean, other than the fact that she's pregnant and she has these little spouts with Blazkowicz, she doesn't really offer much. And I mean, why the fuck is she fighting in these big situations when she's pregnant? I mean, if you get shot, woman, you're pretty much done for as well. You're killing your own kids who have yet to be born. I mean, I don't know why, Anya's a bit more stupid in this game for some reason. However, some of the side characters from the New Order feel a little bit more improved, only a tiny bit, but I feel like I know him a bit more now. Some examples being Set, who just felt like some grumpy scientist from the New Order, actually has a much more comedic side to this game. It was kind of weird to see at first, but it honestly felt more fun to have him being more comedic than just some grumpy dude, and it just made him just a much more fun character to have around. And since Max lost his brother at the end of the New Order, I'm kind of surprised to see that Bombay, a guy who is introduced in the second half of the New Order, becomes of a more brotherly figure to Max. I mean, you don't really see too many scenes about them two, but most of the time when you're in the hub area on the submarine, you actually see them interact with each other quite a lot. And I thought this kind of seemed like a decent enough relationship, and I felt more sympathy for Max's character since he really had no one around in that sort of way to like look after him. And it's actually kind of surprising to see that Bombay stood up to help out with that sort of position. Other than the main cast and survivors from the first game, except Caroline who got killed straight away, there is a bunch of new characters introduced to the game, like Grace, who is just some, you know, in-your-face angry black chick who really didn't offer too much for the story. You had Frau Engel's daughter, who I will admit was pretty interesting since she immediately goes from being a Nazi to a non-Nazi. Everyone pretty much mistrusts her throughout the entire game, and honestly I didn't really think she was trustworthy either. I thought she was playing the long game and getting ready to stab everyone in the back, but really she wasn't. When Grace pushed Engel's daughter's buttons a bit too far, she literally just beats the shit out of Grace, and I'm like, wow, shit, that was actually pretty impressive, and that's probably the most development any of these other characters get. And yeah, that's pretty much it for her character, but hell, it was a cool scene for her.
Don't ever call me a Nazi again! I am not a Nazi! You do not have the right to label me as something I am not, as someone less than yourself, as someone less than human! Say it! Say I'm not a Nazi!
Oh, right. Okay, I get it. You're not a Nazi.
And then you have Horton, who is sort of like, what, your just usual redneck American dude drinking his moonshine. He really wasn't interested, and his whole communist bullshit was just annoying, and I didn't really care about it. So yeah, there was a bunch of new characters introduced, but barely any of them had much of an impact on the whole game overall. So yeah, now we move on to the villains of the game, and they were definitely improved to the last two games. This is definitely something War Machine improved upon entirely, because Death's Head didn't really offer anything other than like just being creepy in the prologue and the final section of the game. That's pretty much it with his character. Really nothing was done with him, and then you just have this Indiana Jones villain knockoff in the Old Blood. Whereas now we have Frau Engel as the main villain, who did put on a good show for me in the New Orders, and she was pretty terrifying there. In this game, she's the one who's hunting you down, and even though there's not many scenes with her, those few scenes are absolute gold with her. She pulls off a hell of a lot of things that terrified and creeped me the hell out. Hell, there's a bunch of times where she's like shoving a gun in your face or having a severed head being shoved in your face. It was nasty, and she was just a nasty, terrifying person. It was great. It's what Nazi villains should be. Yet they just kill her off at the end in the worst way possible. You don't even have a boss fight with her. You just have a cutscene just disintegrating her head, and that's it.
Have the best you got. Then your best won't do. You are my wolf now. These are our words.
That's all that's done with her character to finish it off. It was ridiculously stupid, and I hated that. That's what I hate about the ending overall, is the fact that you just kill her off in such the most ridiculous way possible, and it was just horrible. However, one of the biggest surprises is the fact that you actually meet the big man himself, and that is Hitler. No, you don't get to kill him, though I'm kinda not too surprised that you don't get to kill him, but yeah, Hitler is absolutely crazy. He was a paranoid, insane dude even when the war was going on. So the fact that he's still alive, and he's just paranoid as hell, like he doesn't trust anybody apart from, I don't even think he even trusts himself, considering how much of a complete maniac he is, just going around doing whatever the hell he likes. His body's literally falling apart since he's like pissing and vomiting everywhere. But even when he gets pissed off, like, you want to make sure you don't want to call him Mr. Hitler or say you're from Arizona.
I loved it, Mr. Hitler. Super good.
Mr. Hitler. Wenn Sie mich ansprechen, sagen Sie mein Führer.
Verstanden? Haben Sie keinen Respekt vor Autorität? Ihre Worte gewähren Einblick in einen höchst verräterischen Geist. I am so sorry, mein Führer. Sind Sie denn ein Idiot? No, mein Führer, sind Sie ein verkleideter Schurke, ein Jude? Ein verräterischer Jude? No, mein Führer, I'm from Arizona.
Otherwise, you're going to end up just like that guy did, and yeah, it just kind of proves that Hitler will do whatever the fuck he wants, and no one will just bat an eye. They won't try and do anything against him. Even if he is an old crippled man, he's still the main head of the Nazis. Well, probably. We don't know if someone else has become the new head of the Nazis, but yeah, don't piss off Hitler. That's one thing you don't want to do. Now let's explain the mechanics, as the combat has definitely improved from the first two Wolfenstein games. It feels much more quicker, a bit like Doom is, but not too much like it. It still feels like Wolfenstein, but yeah, in some ways those games were very similar towards each other, but the combat and the pacing of it feels a hell of a lot better than the previous Wolfenstein games. Dual has changed even more. Like the first game, you could just dual any weapon you could. The Old Blood, it was like certain weaponry. Now this game, you can pretty much like combine different weapons. You can have different combinations of weapons to use against the enemies. And I feel like this was an interesting move on Machine Games' part, because now you can experiment with different weapon combinations and which ones are more useful at taking out enemies. And trust me, it's hell of a good thing to do, because there are certain weapons that combined that just work incredibly well when taking out enemies. And sometimes combining a rifle with a shotgun, having short range and long range on your side, can definitely help out in many situations. There are a decent amount of weapon within the game. I don't know if there's more or less compared to the New Order or the Old Blood, but there is a decent amount of new weapons, like a new assault rifle, two new different type of heavy weapons like the diesel grenade launcher or something like that, or like this laser rifle. But it all depends if you pick Wyatt or Fergus, and you require either one of these two weapons. And there's like machine pistols too, which I thought were really cool too. But there's a lot of returning weapons like the normal pistol, the Kampf grenade launcher, the shotguns, and the grenades are a bit different too. Surprisingly enough, it's no longer the usual stick grenades that you have. Instead, now you have like these weird little ones that have different like sort of mechanics to them. And I really like how each of the weapons in this game can be upgraded. If you look around for upgrade kits scattered around the levels, there's like 3 upgrades each for all the weapons. And trust me, you're going to need these upgrades because they will definitely help out, since the enemies can be pretty tough, especially like some upgrades like the armor piercing for the assault rifle, the suppressor for the pistol, like this sort of nail gun for the machine pistols. A lot of these attachments are really useful and I think are pretty damn nice. There is more heavy weapons too compared to the previous Wolfenstein games as well, I think. And there's like about 4 of them, and they're all very useful, especially in tough situations when you're up against a bunch of enemies. And now you can also sprint with the heavy weapons too, instead of having to just trudge along at a slow pace. Now you can actually run with these damn things, so that's a very handy new game mechanic added in finally. Perks have once again made a return, and even though they were lackluster in the Old Blood, for some reason they don't feel too great in this game either, even though it takes longer to master the perks, since now they like go through a bunch of stages instead of a select number this time. The perks themselves just don't feel as fun to unlock unlike the previous Wolfenstein games. Maybe it's because it takes longer to do them, or maybe it's because they just aren't as innovative compared to the New Order's perks, which were pretty damn nice, and the ways of fully completing them were actually interesting, whereas this just feels a bit too normal and bland, and something we've seen a lot in other games that have perks that you can use and unlock. And another weird thing is that they randomly shove in halfway through the game is these new things called contraptions, like ramshackles, constrictor harness, and like the Battle Walker. I mean, these are interesting ideas since they make the level design a little bit more interesting, since it gives you more options to take out your enemies. But the Battle Walker and the Constrictor Harness aren't particularly necessary in most areas. The only one you're really going to need is the Ramshackle, and that's actually pretty useful at just ramming enemies. That's the entire point of it. But the others are just kind of unnecessary and not very useful unless you're trying to look for hidden collectibles or something like that. But it was a neat idea, but it just didn't work in the long run, to be honest. However, at least when it comes to choosing the contraptions, they have their own sort of perks and advantages over each other that can be useful, but you don't really notice much of a difference. Although one of the best things they've improved upon in this game is definitely the takedowns. In the New Order and the Old Blood, they were fairly simplistic and you just use like a certain weapon and that'd be it. In this, you'd have a hatchet, and damn, these takedowns can be absolutely gruesome. The example I just showed you is one of many different types of takedowns Blazkowicz will use to tear apart the Nazis, and these are very random. There isn't really a select one you can choose from, that he'll just do what he wants, but these takedowns are brilliant, absolutely gory as hell, and just makes the game feel more like what it should be. However, it seems that machine games still haven't managed to figure out the whole melee sort of mechanics, where like you can just easily just melee your guys, or when it comes to throwing your hatchet. Well, I've always had a problem with the Wolfenstein games, is how easy it is to hit a crate or something and you just throw your freaking hatchet. It annoys me how machine games still haven't figured this out. And also another thing is that you have less health and armor for some reason. Like, you have a limit of like 50 or 100, and then you'll have your overcharge, but it just doesn't feel as effective compared to previous Wolfenstein games. You feel a hell of a lot weaker than you did previously. And speaking of difficulty, that leads me to the enemies. Now, I feel like the enemies have actually been improved, especially when it comes to the AI, and in stealth moments. What I've always had a problem with the stealth is that the enemies don't notice you until they're literally in your faces, as I did show in the New Order. However, in this game, they definitely notice you from definitely a certain amount of good distance, and it makes the stealth a little bit more challenging in the way it pretty much should have been from the get-go. However, when it comes to actually fighting the enemy themselves, they don't feel as strong compared to the New Order, and there's a very small difference between the health limits of like certain enemies. Like infantry and shock trooper health limits are much shorter compared to what they were in the New Order, and it's very difficult to tell which is who, apart from like extra pieces of armor and the weapons they're carrying. But these guys just drop so quickly, especially when you get upgrades throughout the game, which definitely help with the combat. But a really annoying thing is the fact that the enemies deal more damage than they actually have than health. I mean, so the fact that the enemies are weaker, but they also deal more damage to you, really sort of imbalances everything. Or does it balance everything? I don't know. It just means that the more enemies they throw at you, even if you can take them out quickly, still do a hell of a lot of damage against you, and it makes some of the whole missions and fighting sequences just really fucking annoying to do, and you end up dying so much more than you usually do in these Wolfenstein games, and it just pisses you off. And another really annoying thing is the fact that there's no bosses in the game. What, did Machine Games just give up after the Old Blood? I mean, yeah, they were freaking terrible, but at least the New Order had some good bosses. But there's none of them to be seen here. I mean, there's boss-type enemies, like big giant machine mechs, giant robotic dogs, and whatever these last dudes that were introduced during the final mission were, but they were pretty damn easy to take down if you knew what you were doing and used certain weapon combinations. But it's just the fact that there's no boss battles. I mean, not even for Engel was a boss battle, like I said. What? Why? Isn't Wolfenstein supposed to have bosses, like Doom does? It's just the fact that it doesn't feel like a Wolfenstein game when you take them out and just have lots of enemies trying to kill you, and that's it. It makes the combat feel pretty damn tedious when you're just doing the same thing over and over and don't have something special to break it up. However, luckily, the enemy variation, there's a good amount of them. There's your usual infantry, the shock troopers are still here, the big heavy troopers are there as well with their big heavy weapons. There's a bit of a difference with these guys as well. They make them a little bit more flexible by the fact they can now jet boost at you, but it's really cool when you like ram into them and it can just make them explode. But these guys aren't as tough either, especially if you just use dual wield armor piercing assault rifles and they just drop like hell. Hell, even the machine pistols with the nail gun attachment can kill them fairly quickly. And there's a lot of other types too. You even have commanders, which have Enigma codes now, which I'll explain later. You even fight against robots and flying drones, and there's it's quite a decent amount of stuff here. But what really pisses me off though, with some of the enemy types is how just unfair some of them are and how distracting it can be. Like, there's a new different type of dog mech which just comes at you and feels like a goddamn hyperactive ticker from the Gears of War games, and it's just annoying as hell when they blow up in your face when you kill them, and then you're surrounded by enemies afterwards and get riddled with bullets. It just, it frustrated me so often when these bits happened. It's like, they tried to make some new types of enemies, but they just didn't work. I mean, the robots were okay, but these ticker dog things just didn't. Moving on, let's talk about the level design. Now, Wolfenstein has always had this sort of problem of not looking great. It felt too linear, especially with the New Order. All Blood was alright, but still felt the same. And Wolfenstein 2 hasn't really built upon that at all. It still feels very linear and quite tedious. The only difference is the fact that they've introduced the contraptions, but that's only added so little. I mean, it gives you more things to do when it comes to sneaking up on your enemies and like exploring around the place, but that's really it. The game just feels so compact still. It's like Machine Games just haven't really learned anything apart from just introducing the contraptions. And yeah, I mean, again, just like the New Order, you go all over the place to different areas. I mean, not too much, but the fact that this game is supposed to be centered in America, I feel like I'm hardly in America or exploring any of it. The only time I actually felt like I was in an occupied part of America was that one town in Roswell, and that was it. Sure, it was fun, like, looking around the whole atom-bombed ruins of Manhattan, but it felt like I was like in that one city in Gears of War 3 where all the Ash people were. It just felt like a rip-off of that. Other than that, most of the time I was in like underground bunkers, and those aren't really great to look at either. I mean they look pretty like nice, but that's it. They just weren't fun to go around, and it just felt like most of the other Wolfenstein games. I mean, yeah, that's pretty much the whole point most of the time, but at least with the Old Blood, they actually made the Wolfenstein castle look pretty damn cool. In this game, they don't really do any of that. Although I will admit, going to Venus was an interesting move, but I felt like they were just trying to one-up themselves from going to the moon in the New Order, and I'm just like, how did it, I mean, it didn't make too much sense. It's like, it's only 5 months have gone by, so did the Nazis already have this space technology to get to Venus? Or, I don't know, it was kind of weird and came out of nowhere, in my opinion. There is a nice hub section, like in the New Order, where you had your little bunker in Berlin. This time you have your submarine. And despite the fact that it's big and there's a lot of things to look around, it's kind of confusing. I mean, yeah, you have signs pointing to places and where they are, but sometimes getting around the whole hub area just felt really frustrating to me. It's like, I wanted to try and get somewhere, but I couldn't remember the route, or it didn't give me clear directions on where to go. Like, most of the time, trying to get from one side of the hub to the other can just lead you to different places, and you're like, where the hell do I go? So, but at least it makes the whole area feel more lively when the characters are like interacting with different things, but that's it. Although one thing I definitely will admit is that the graphics do look great. This is a very good looking game, especially like the atom-bombed New York, Manhattan area. That was really good, and just the takedowns and the whole goriness of them, that was absolutely great. The characters look great too. A lot of the enemies and the vehicles, the weapons, all the just all the different levels and stuff look really damn nice. However, there were a few weird things that I did encounter, glitch-wise. Like one time there was this Nazi dude I killed and he carried on monologuing even though he was dead.
Was ist damit überhaupt passiert?
Geschlossen. Uns sind die Gefangenen ausgegangen.
Oh, na dann.
And another time is where I encountered this weird, like, flare light effect that felt like a flash grenade was going off in my face, but it was just like some weird texture glitch or something. I don't know how that happened, but it was really weird when I encountered it. The soundtrack, at least, was a little bit more memorable, I think. The only track I remember from this game was pretty much when you're going through the submarine in your wheelchair, taking out Nazis, and then this country rock guitar starts kicking in, and it felt like a pretty heroic moment to be like Blazkowicz once again going around killing Nazis, but most of the time the music still didn't like get to me. That's the problem with Wolfenstein, is the fact his music just doesn't entertain me as often as I think it does. Now, once again, there is of course collectibles to find within this game. There's definitely a lot more compared to the New Order and the Old Blood, with the fact that they now combine certain things like there's gold and like concept art to find, but it's also these weird things with star cards. I feel like that's just like the game developers, like the sort of ID tags that you see in Alien Isolation. I feel like it's the same sort of thing as that. You can even find toys for Max, and there's also like death cards for assassination missions, which I will explain in a minute. But the only collectibles you really want to get are the upgrade kits, and trust me, getting every single one of these would definitely help you in overcoming the rising difficulty this game offers you. And now we come to the final bit that I really absolutely hated. As I said before, the commanders drop Enigma codes, which you use on the hub area as you go to this Enigma machine, which allows you to unlock assassinations. And these things are completely and utterly pointless. There is no point in these things being in the goddamn game. The game tries to be a bit more open world like, as the fact that you have this like map of the US where you can go to different areas you've been to and try to take down Nazi commanders and all that sort of thing, and that's all you do. There is no sort of, they don't do anything to help out with the story or anything. It's just like a side quest that's completely and utterly pointless, just so you can just gain a few achievements and that's it. Sure, it helps you to find collectibles and other things you might have missed, but it really doesn't do anything to help you. And yes, there are also other side quests that characters on the hub area give to you, but these don't do anything either. I don't get why these things were in the game. The fact that the game, to me, if I didn't do these assassinations, would have taken like 10 to 11 hours, pretty much the same as the New Order. But the fact that if you do these assassinations, you're adding on 6 whole hours of just mind-numbing tediousness. This just wasn't needed, and it absolutely bored the shit out of me that I did this. I don't know why I did this, and I completely regret doing it because I would have gotten this game done a hell of a lot quicker if I didn't do them. So yeah, overall, Wolfenstein 2 is a big mess. It's not terrible. I don't know if it was as bad as the Old Blood or not. I don't think it is. I mean, they did sort out some problems in the game, but they aren't as great when it comes to the problems they did make in this game. And honestly, this game, it was really a mixed bag. But I feel like I did enjoy the first half of the game, and then the second half just completely just ruined it for me. And yeah, there were some things I did like, but there were a lot of things I didn't like about Wolfenstein 2. It had a half-decent story, and by half-decent, I mean the first half was at least good, and then the second half ruined it. The combat was great, the enemies was mixed, but I think they were mainly still fun to fight. The collectibles, there was no point in those. Graphics were great, the music was a bit more memorable, and the assassinations can just go and die for all I care. But yeah, Wolfenstein 2 is an incredibly mixed game, but overall I'm going to give Wolfenstein 2 . So yeah, that's my review of Wolfenstein 2. I am looking forward to the fact that the next Wolfenstein game, Youngblood, is going to be a cooperative game that's based around Blazkowicz's twins, and it's going to be set in Paris in the 1980s. That does sound interesting to me, and I'm actually kind of looking forward to it, so I hope that doesn't disappoint me, since I can actually play with a friend for once. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this review. Leave a like down below, subscribe, comment on what you think of the game and anything else I might have missed. Comment what other games you think I could do, share this video on social media, and I'll see you guys in the next random video.